Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Well, if you have been listening to the show, you know you're in for a treat. This is part 3 of my very special recordings with Dr. Judi Hollis, who is a best-selling author. Her first book was Fat is a Family Affair. Her second was Fat and Furious. Her third was Hot and Heavy. Her fourth was From Bagels to Buddha. I'd say you have a way with words, Dr. Judi Hollis.
Yeah, it's fun.
So,
the fifth one is called Diva Seeking Shiva.
Diva Seeking Shiva. So we are moving into, as you say, the progression of your books into the spiritual realm. And before we do that, I want to go back because we kind of went from Fat as a Family Affair to sensuality and eating and savoring food and really appreciating it, letting yourself really appreciate it so that you are satisfied and you're not just looking for something else, which is that something else that we have to investigate. And when you were talking in the earlier show about Fat and Furious, I was thinking about the book by Nancy Friday, My Mother, Myself. And you don't even have to read the book to get it. I thought her title was absolutely brilliant, My Mother, Myself, and how the developmental task for males is to separate from their mothers. So they shouldn't identify with the feminine and be a mama's boy and be a sissy and all that, and how hard it is to separate from the usually more loving and nurturing parent to try to identify with the father who may be more distant, although these days there are more virtual dads, virtual working dads, that sort of thing. So, but the developmental task for a female is so much different because she doesn't have to separate from her mother to hold on to her femininity. And what she does is she identifies and she stays stuck. So you were looking at kind of the addictive personality as someone who is immature and very dependent upon something else for their happiness. And I just wanted to check in with you about that, more of that, because I think I understood you to be writing about how a mother has had eating issues, perhaps, eating disorders or eating issues, and she is undersatisfied or unsatisfied with herself. And somehow the daughter picks this up and, in a way, kind of acts out her mother's problems, or there's a lot of unfinished business here. And would you mind talking about that a little bit, and the individuation for females?
Well, it's mostly that the parent has not found their own individuation. Yeah. And so they're finding their whole identity in being a parent. And it's too much pressure to put on the child, and it's an avoidance of developing their own life. And the mother who can make her own life happen is doing the best thing in the world for her daughter.
Right.
And it's also encouraging a little bit more selfishness. And I find this a lot with overeater women. They want to be such a nice big mama, helping everybody, doing and going and being so sweet and so helpful, and then they go home and they binge their brains out.
Exactly.
I remember, in my early recovery, that I would call my sponsor. In the 12-step programs, you have a mentor who's a person that you kind of use to help you with your problems that do come when you stop overeating. Other things come to the fore. And I called her one time, and I was just in such a snit, and I had to talk to someone right now, and I told her how angry I was. And she said, "Dear, I'm having my lunch right now. Do you think you could call me back in 20 minutes? And I said, "Sure." And I hung up. I was so upset what nerve she had. But she taught me that she can have a nice lunch and take care of herself, and I will survive, and we'll all survive, and I can have a little discipline and restraint and call her back in 20 minutes. And so that then allowed me, as I started working with people, to having the same kind of boundaries and very nicely being able to say no and being able to say, I do self-care first. You know, I'm on the airplane and I get the oxygen mask over my mouth before I help you out. Mm-hmm. So many people came to treatment with me and said, "Oh, I can't give that much time to come to treatment because my family needs me and they must be able to reach me by phone." So if I'd allow a phone call, all of a sudden they have a phone call and someone at home is calling saying, "Where's the dish soap?" Like this was the important phone call when this person's life is on the line. Yeah. And most of my patients got to see that they're not that important and necessary. Now, that was depressing, you know, to face that. But then they became free to really take care of themselves. And just like my sponsor taught me, they taught their families how people can live their own lives, and everybody's going to make it down the road.
Well, I'm remembering when women were really going into the workforce in full force, and then there was this whole bevy of literature about is it okay for the children, you know, if she works outside of the home. And I always put it that way. When people say to women, "Do you work?" Yes, women have always worked. They just haven't gotten paid for it.
Right. Yes.
So I will say something, "Do you work outside the home?" I will really make that distinction because in a market economy, the only work that's valued is paid work.
Right. Yeah.
So she will actually say, raising 2 or 3 children, no, I don't work. I don't work. And believe it.
Right.
And then the husband believes it, and he says, "Well, I make the decisions because I bring home the money," not understanding that the family is an economic unit, which is an exchange of goods and services. And the woman gives many services. If you were to look in the marketplace for what she's doing, we're looking at $100,000 plus a year. Yet, because it's not paid work, it's not work. So a woman contributes just as much to the family economy, even if the male is the salaried person, or whatever it may be. It may be also be the opposite in some ways. But I really just wanted to say that. And also, the other thing that's important is that what came out in the literature is that the best way to raise a happy, healthy child is to have a happy, healthy mother.
Exactly. Right.
So you put that together, and now we're looking at what you're talking about, which is authentic self-care, not fake self-care, as in drinking or drugging or any other addiction, or cosmetic self-care. I have the perfect cosmetics. I have the perfect nail polish. I have the perfect glossy hair. I go to the gym. I have the perfect body. I'm wearing the most perfect, expensive brand label shoes. And I'm a wreck inside, and I don't develop my own personhood.
Right.
So that's what we're looking at. Real, authentic self-care.
Right. So what you're saying is bringing up to me, I wanted to go back to the whole thing about family systems. Family therapy originated in about the 1940s when psychiatrists were releasing patients from mental hospitals, and these people looked pretty much recovered, and they sent them home, and within a couple weeks they were back doing all of these things again. And they said, well, we need to call in the family to ask them about that.
Right.
And what they realized is that getting around this certain family member, then this patient would act this way. And when they got around this certain family member, they'd act that way. That we're very adaptive organisms, and we pick up what the other people want and need, right? So when we're talking about a mother not being happy, and the child picking that up and thinking it's their job to make the mother happy, then she goes on and keeps continuing that system for generations and generations. So hopefully we have some way to change that. I mean, I hate to say that now because, I started doing this work 40 years ago and it still hasn't changed. The idea about individuation and people making their own lives, I think it's more than it ever was before. But still, in a family, most people are feeling too bound by the roles they were taught growing up.
Oh, yes.
Instead of expanding into all the other possibilities for their personhood, not realizing how multifaceted they are.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about the term introjects, that people are introjected with all of these beliefs. So it's like mommy and daddy were prejudiced, I'm prejudiced, rather than a person learning from their own authentic, their own personal experience.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. So when you say a child's job is to make their mother happy, that some children actually intuitively get that message, or non-verbally, or even verbally.
Children feel they're the center of the universe.
Right.
So anything that happens around them is their responsibility. So if these adults around me are not making their lives work, it must be my fault. Always when parents get divorced, the kids feel, it was me. I did something wrong. I shouldn't have fought with my brother. Whatever it was. So, everybody taking on a mistaken sense of responsibility.
So we can be over responsible, or we can be under responsible, but to be appropriately responsible, which is to be appropriately responsive, to myself and others. So let's just follow that thread. So a woman individuates and she finds her own bliss, as Joseph Campbell would say, and she's happy, but she still fights. She still gets annoyed. She can fight with her husband if she's married or whatever that is. She can get annoyed with her children. So how do you distinguish that when you're really looking at healthy people and in a healthy system?
Well, I think that, it's so hard, and you know this yourself, when you've worked so long with people, you can almost smell it. You can feel it when the main thing you're feeling is boundary crossing.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
You just know that, you ask somebody in the room how they're feeling, and another person answers for them. She feels this. All these little signals about people are not allowed to hold their own space in the room. And a lot of the people we diagnose as mentally ill are people who have seen this very early on. They see it and they sense it, and they know this other person really doesn't want to hear from me. You know that line from the movie, you can't handle the truth. Well, a lot of people in families know that their loved ones don't want to hear from them, and they don't want to hear their truth. They want them to just follow in line. and agree. And some people decide instead to, quote unquote, act out or go crazy. And I'm not saying it's all that simplistic.
Yeah.
But the finding the road back to sanity is that simple. I'm not saying these things caused each other X to Z, but the road back is pretty simple. And it involves respect. And in all relationships, in all marriages, you can smell if people respect each other, or if they're talking down to each other, or playing games. You know? And it you know, a lot of perceptive people see these things, but they don't know what they're seeing.
They see it and they feel it, as you say.
Yeah.
When you're being intruded upon or manipulated, you feel it in your body. Right?
Yeah.
There's a constraint in the body, like a compression, like a wince, like a wince in the body.
Yeah. And the hairs stand up on your arms.
Yes. Yeah.
We've all experienced people we can't stand to be around.
Right.
And that's why.
So I'm thinking about the etymology of the word respect. Oh. So we have spect as in spectacle, spectator. It means to see.
Uh-huh.
And re as in again. So to see and to really see.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You're welcome, dear Dr. Judi Hollis. I really see you. I get you. I acknowledge you.
Uh-huh.
I respect your boundaries. You and I are separate entities, and that's really the only way people can make contact is if they are separate entities. If they don't have boundaries, physical boundaries certainly with the body, the skin, and emotional boundaries, there's no real contact because it's just one big mush.
Right.
Right? It's what we call enmeshed. It's one big mush. So you have to, what is it, when the rubber hits the road, it's attraction comes from the word traction. So the rubber hits the road. So there's real traction there, which is attraction. So the idea of, as you say, it's one simple truth, to respect the road back to sanity. And I would say it is learning self-trust. And people who are introjected greatly, we're all introjected, but people who are taught how to think and how to feel and how to behave are so introjected, they don't have a sense of their own needs even. And to start to develop self-trust, in the last couple of shows we've looked at self-trust with the body. My body knows when I've had enough.
Right.
My body knows when I've had enough food.
And your body knows when you're around the wrong people. Your body knows when you're going to bed with the wrong guy. And
or gal.
Yeah.
Right?
But we don't want to see. We don't want to acknowledge to ourselves what we see.
Yes. And in studies on date rape, they found that the women, when they looked back, when they did a retrospective on it, they knew the cues, right?
Yeah.
When he invaded the space, touched the knees, whatever it was, but they ignored the signals. They didn't want to believe it, and they ignored it. And even more interesting just as interesting about date rape is the idea that the young women did not call out for help, say in a fraternity house, because they didn't want to embarrass the rapist.
Wow.
So talking about the individuation and being your own person, and not about the whole idea of being nice versus choosing what you want to do for yourself. So this is what we're looking at. So this is Dr. Duffy Spencer, and I am interviewing Dr. Judi Hollis, best-selling author. And you were saying in the last show that you have also videos and audios and a newsletter and lots of good information for people. And so, let's see. We talked about how we met in the TV studio around 30 years ago. And I did my doctoral dissertation on which was about social psychology and how women managed to deal with overeating and losing weight through a different construction of reality, And I studied the difference between Overeaters Anonymous as the medical model, the spiritual medical model, and Fat is a Feminist Issue as the socio-political model of what it means, how you frame overeating and overweight. And each required different kinds of behavior, and basically it came down to it didn't matter which model you chose, the medical, spiritual, or the socio-political. What mattered was that you adhered to the social construction of reality, what was taught to you about how to deal with this, how to deal with it.
With what? I'm sorry.
How to deal with the overeating and the losing weight. So the Overeaters Anonymous, following the 12 steps, and it had much more to do with, some people would call it rigid, a very strict eating plan, no eating in between meals, etc., and weighing and measuring. And the Fat is a Feminist Issue was more about savoring food and enjoying what you ate and eating slowly and doing measuring of on a 10-point scale. 10 is Thanksgiving full, so let me stay around 6. And I found a lot of interesting things in the two different subcultures.
Yeah,
the two different groups.
All of these things.
I think that there's a third model, and I think we're talking about this third model. So we only have about 5 minutes left, and basically, I know your book From Bagels to Buddha. And then from Diva to Shiva.
No, Diva Seeking Shiva.
Oh, Diva Seeking Shiva.
Yeah. Well, From Bagels to Buddha was about the difficulty in surrendering to letting go and following direction. And it starts out with me in a Buddhist monastery arguing with the monks about the rules. And I was going to leave, and I was in a snit, and the headmaster, I talked with him, and I said, I'm leaving. And he said, well, you can leave. He said, but I want you to know, he said, that we have these rules so that you can fall apart. And bong, that really spoke to me, that he was saying, we have a structure here, and within that structure, if you just follow along, you'll be safe and you'll land on a pillow.
So the structure was actually the safety net.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so that kind of respect for discipline really developed for me within studying Buddhism. And then years later, I went back to the origins of Buddhism, which are Hinduism. The Buddha was a Hindu prince. And the Hindus, it turns out that Hinduism is probably more interesting for me because I think it's more sensual. There's more of an appreciation for the kind of frenetic wild woman, whereas Buddhism is slow and quiet. And I like the more wild, passionate side of things. And so this book now, Diva Seeking Shiva, is a lot about surrender and growing into later life and aging, the kind of changes that you notice and your acceptance of those changes. And what I did is, like I told you, I'm a world traveler, and I've been to Bali 3 different times, the island of Bali. And so the book starts out with some of my early years being a wild thing, and then the more adult relationships I developed with men. So I went to Bali with 3 different men at 3 different life stages. And I saw how my choice in men had changed, and how the island of Bali had changed.
Oh, my goodness.
And how I had changed. And so that's what happens throughout that book, and it's kind of fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wow. So I never knew that about Hinduism versus Buddhism, but I always applaud the wild thing, the wild within us, you know, women who run with the wolves.
Right.
And that we are wild by nature, and that we have been, men included, over-domesticated in certain ways. And what we're looking at, and we have to close in a moment with this 3-part series, and I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Judi Hollis. This has been such a joy and a pleasure for me to talk to you and to hear your wisdom, which literally just pours out of you.
Okay.
Because you've lived a life.
Oh, yeah.
You've lived your life, and you're talking not only academically, of course, you're talking from your direct experience. And being a writer, it helps you actually even be more focused in on the learnings, the lessons from those experiences.
Right.
So, my dear, thank you so much again, Dr. Judi Hollis. And this is Dr. Duffy Spencer saying goodbye for now and wishing you great relationships.